There are people, a great number of people, who think that you two are spoiled brats, that you are evil, that you are monsters.
That's not who I am, but I can't defend that.
Netflix has a lot of power. They have so much power. It seems like
Eric and Lyle Menendez will never walk free again. The two brothers showed no emotion when hearing their sentences.
They know not what they have done.
Lyle's only emotional gesture.
Forgive them, for they know not what they have done. Have you guys noticed that Netflix is shaping the public's views on infamous crimes?
The reason why we have become more public is because after the documentary, we began to get, many requests from media and others about where was the case. The case is actually scheduled for a hearing on November 29th, but for the documentary, quite frankly, we probably would not be talking at this point.
The recent creation by Netflix of the two crime docs, the one on the Menendez brothers and JonBenet Ramsey, have reignited public interest at a cost of something, okay? This is just purely seeing a balloon and poking holes in it with a small needle, and then the balloon doesn't pop. I'm just poking holes in the balloon for some reason.
Menendez is slamming the series, saying it is rampant with horrible and blatant lies. The show, which portrays the brothers' alleged abuse at the hands of their father, also implies an intimate relationship between the brothers, which has drawn viewer backlash. In a statement released by his wife Tammy, Eric writes, "It is sad for me to know that Netflix's dishonest portrayal of the tragedies surrounding our crime have taken the painful truths several steps backward."
In this video, we're peeling back the curtain on Netflix's true crime empire, and we're going to be exposing them on how they craft conflicting narratives that blur the lines between fact and fiction. Are you ready to question everything you thought you knew about cases that are really serious and kind of like completely unsolved and crazy, but also not completely unsolved, but also unsolved, but seemingly solved by the internet?
Oh, hello. I'm JonBenet.
It was a case that people couldn't stop talking about. Some people don't think it's ever going to be solved.
Yeah, I'm not either, though, to be honest. We're just going to be talking about Netflix and how much f***ing power they have. It's wild how much power Netflix has.
LA County District Attorney George Gascon saying the sentencing should be reviewed. The Menendez brothers have been serving life in prison without the possibility of parole, for their appeals repeatedly denied as well. Gascon says there are many questions surrounding new evidence in support of sexual abuse claims the brothers made against their father, Jose Menendez. The case drawing new interest after the release of the Netflix series based on the case.
Just not the power to make good film and TV. They kind of suck. On August 20th, 1989, Lyle and Eric Menendez brutally murdered their parents, Jose and Kitty, in their Beverly Hills mansion.
Beverly Hills emergency?
Yes, please.
What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem?
Someone killed my parents.
Pardon me?
What?
Those facts are clear. The facts that the brothers used their shotguns to kill their parents as they watch TV, that's legit, that's real. But the motives behind the crime have been debated for decades.
Do you think the media has portrayed you fairly? Can you tell?
I don't know if anyone can be portrayed fairly in the media, who they are.
Well, let me say it. There are people, a great number of people, who think that you two are spoiled brats, that you are evil, that you are monsters. What do you say to them?
That's not who I am, but I can't defend that. Because I came from a family of wealth, it doesn't make me spoiled.
The initial prosecution painted a picture of greed and entitlement, and they argued that Lyle and Eric, then 21 years old and 18 years old, killed their parents to inherit their $14 million estate. You know, for money. A prosecutor by the name of Pamela Bozenich claimed these boys killed their parents because they wanted money, pure and simple. Now, the defense, as you can probably imagine, told a very different and difficult, traumatic story. They alleged that Jose and Kitty had subjected their sons to years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. The brothers testified saying they feared for their lives, believing their father would kill them to prevent that abuse from being exposed. At the time, public opinion was deeply divided during the original trials. Some saw Lyle and Eric as cold-blooded killers, while others sympathized with their claims of abuse. And the first trial in 1993 ended in hung juries for both brothers. This is a hung jury, by the way. Basically, they couldn't agree.
If they remain in deadlock, the case can end in a hung jury because a jury can't reach a unanimous decision. Hung juries often lead to a retrial of a case.
It wasn't until 1996, a few years later, that they were finally convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Well, I think that Judge Weisberg correctly made all of the rulings concerning the admission of the evidence in this case, and although it is to be expected that they will appeal, I don't think that they have any good grounds for that.
The Netflix show... Dude, I'm gonna... Anyways... The Netflix show leans heavily into the defense narrative, the narrative of abuse, and presents a more sympathetic portrayal of the Menendez brothers. And that was the defense from the original trial, and only years later, after a hung jury, the conviction and life in prison was the final result.
Eric and Lyle Menendez will never walk free again. The two brothers showed no emotion when hearing their sentences. Lyle's only emotional gesture, he waved goodbye to his fiancée, Anna Erickson.
It's completely valid to make a show about this, I mean, in all honesty. And the show has sparked very fresh controversy and an extremely renewed interest in a case that has been long closed. Or at least so we thought. Until Netflix came along. Thank you, Netflix, for season 3 of Mindhunter. To myself and to I'm sure many others, the Menendez murders have become more than just some kind of true crime entertainment story. It's a true cultural touchstone and a major point in the current pop culture zeitgeist. I see sexual hot edits of the two brothers from their trial footage on TikTok of people fawning over them. I mean, I've seen that of, to be fair, Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer as well, because people are nuts.
There's no going back.
But this is a very big, very powerful thing that I want to explore a little bit in this video. One thing is certainly clear. Netflix has the ability to shape the American understanding of family dynamics, abuse, and even justice, which is kind of wild. Now, to be clear, I am not casting judgment to justice. I think a retrial would be great. I believe there's talks of that happening. The pursuit of justice should never end, and it's not like people haven't been wrongly convicted of things before, so I'm always open for transparency. Just to be clear, I'm not saying anything specific. I'm not saying, well, they're guilty. Sure, yes, sir. Thank you, perfect justice system that always works perfectly no matter what. Sure, yes, sir. I'm not a bootwickle, all right? But what I am is aware that true crime narratives, when made by Netflix, have the power to reshape cultural memory and influence how we perceive not just specific cases like the Menendez brothers case and JonBenét Ramsey, but also just broader issues of crime and punishment. To really try and understand this as maximally as possible, we have to understand the full impact of Netflix's approach to true crime. We need to look at their track record, guys, from Making a Murderer to Tiger King. These guys are really good at crafting compelling and sometimes controversial narratives, okay?
I am never gonna financially recover from this.
And sometimes, you know, it's not real. Like, Netflix isn't regulated by the Supreme Court. There's no judge, there's no jury making a Netflix show. It's a team of people who are like, how do we get as many views as humanly possible on this? How do we spin the best narrative we possibly can? Back in my day, documentaries were boring as shit. Not really, that's not true, but Netflix definitely does not make boring documentaries.
It's not every day that a zookeeper went to prison for murder for hire.
There are more captive tigers in the U.S. than there are in the wild throughout the world.
Animal people are nuts, man.
Their true crime hits have captivated millions upon millions of people. But some people are critical of that and argue that they're blurring the line between entertainment and truth. And with true crime, there are real lives and human beings implicated, so just overt speculation is probably not extremely responsible. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, and I'm not saying, like, you know, I specifically am a judge and a jury and executioner or whatever, and like just general people kind of out there, but Netflix has a lot of power. They have so much power, it seems like. So yeah, It's a little different. And they kind of kick this all off with the cultural phenomenon of making a murderer back in 2015.
Stephen Avery spent 18 years in prison for something he didn't do.
This show turned the name Stephen Avery into a household name for a short period of time. I couldn't escape. Then came The Keepers, The Staircase, and of course, The Tiger King. All right, guys. Also, Mindhunter. All of these shows racked up amazing, massive viewership numbers, sparked countless debates amongst people on Facebook particularly. And with all of these, we can clearly see that Netflix uses slick production, some dramatic music, and especially with the case of Tiger King, very clever editing to turn real life crazy shit into binge-worthy YouTube content. Well, not YouTube content, streaming content. YouTube content. My favorite YouTuber, Netflix, Mr. Flix. Mr. Flix is not afraid to take sides or push a very specific narrative. The question is it ethical, guys? That's for you to answer. I'm not a genius. I'm a really stupid guy. I'm wearing a pearl-snapped polo shirt. I mean, look at me. I look like a dumbass right now. I look like an actual dumbass, and I'm on YouTube talking to you all, hopefully billions of people. Billions. But let's be real, more like a few 100,000 men and 1 or 10 women. And one of them is my beautiful, loving girlfriend. So yeah, I'm a bit of a recreational fence sitter, but I feel like Netflix, there's some ethical concerns here. I don't know exactly what they are. I haven't thought about it a lot, but it feels like this is a lot of power that they've got. The same people who brought you Tiger King are now bringing you a doc that is going to lead to a retrial. Oh my goodness.
Despite a media frenzy surrounding a popular Netflix documentary and scripted series, Hochman says he now wants to review all the evidence.
By the way, I don't want to make it seem like the retrial is bad. We're talking about Netflix, okay? The Menendez brothers definitely need a retrial. They've spent a lot of time in prison. I don't think the life without parole makes a lot of sense given the circumstances. Plus, the reexamination for their trial was called for in 2023, well before Netflix's documentary. And I think the Netflix documentary just spearheaded it. So, once again, we're not talking specifically about this case. We're talking about Netflix. There's a ton of evidence pointing towards the brothers being extremely abused in many different ways. Anyways, just to make that clear, we're talking about Netflix. Let's go back to Making a Murderer, all right? A prosecutor, Ken Kratz, claimed the show left out key evidence that pointed towards Stephen Avery's guilt. He said, "You don't want to muddy up a perfectly good conspiracy movie with what actually happened." That's written, documented. Tiger King faced similar heat. Wildlife advocate and antagonist of the show, Carol Baskin, who the show heavily implied murdered her husband, called the entire thing salacious and sensational. And she's definitely not wrong. Like, let's be real. Tiger King, not exactly a bastion of truth and transparency when it comes to a show there. Though it did pull 64 million household viewers in its first month, which is a lot of eyeballs and a shit ton of influence over the public when you're spinning a specific narrative. Plus, people were so passionate about which side they were taking too. There were heated conversations at the dinner table over who really was the villain. Wait, not you guys? Just me and my family? Oh wow, we really care about nonsense.
One time I put a firefly in my butthole.
Why?
To make my farts glow.
Just kidding, that's a lie. We don't actually care at all about any of that. My parents didn't even watch it. Some of the memes were funny. I did watch it, to be honest, but goofy as it is blatantly obvious that Netflix's true crime formula, the way that they produce entertainment, does change the way people consume real stories and real narratives, which this isn't new, obviously. We've been getting lied to and propagandized ever since the spawn of the radio. To be honest with you, H.G. Wells, how about that, bud? How about War of the Worlds, bud? How about the mass hysteria back in the 1930s? Netflix is not just reporting facts, they are crafting narratives. It's like a gigantic YouTuber. It really is. Like a massive guy who's just trying to make shit, get clicks and entertainment. But sometimes that shit is real and is true crime. And there's gotta be some kind of ethical issue in that, I feel like, right? Maybe? Am I wrong? I don't know, dude. I love watching it. I like watching it, but then I look into it and I'm like, oh, maybe this is just like one side Maybe this is very one-sided and I should take more responsibility for the things that I'm saying potentially at this point. I've realized recently I'm very stupid. I've realized, and I need to stop doing that. So now back to the more recent show, Monster, with Eric and Lyle Menendez. Some of the things that the show gets right and wrong about the case. Let's see. Critics. This is purely me bolstering up people who know way more than I do. I'm not pretending that I know what's right and wrong and anything about justice, okay? Like, for real. I'm a YouTuber. Now let's start with what Eric and Lyle themselves are calling blatant lies in regard to the series.
A real-life subject, Eric Menendez, is slamming the series, saying it is rampant with horrible and blatant lies. The show, which portrays the brothers' alleged abuse at the hands of their father, also implies an intimate relationship between the brothers.
This is crazy. Like, it's just such an entertainment thing. I don't know. So the show kicks off with some heavy drama portraying the brothers' emotional turmoil before the murders. We see a tense shark fishing trip that supposedly happened the day before the killings.
I think Lyle felt really horrible that he had suspected that this was happening because it had happened to him.
This part actually did have some truth to it, it seems. Lyle did testify that they thought their parents were planning to kill them during this trip.
What did you think was going to happen on the fishing trip?
We felt that the fishing trip was arranged to kill us in a way that nobody could know.
Why did you go?
We shouldn't have gone, but I don't really know why we went.
But at this point, it starts to get a little bit more creative. The show shows the murders as a big confrontation with the brothers dramatically facing off against their parents.
What are you doing? What is that?
That's not true at all. It's according to court records. Official records, Jose Menendez was actually shot from behind at very close range, which is just, you know, an execution, not really a fight. Then the show gets really weird and starts to heavily imply that the brothers had an incestuous relationship, and maybe the reason that they killed their parents was because their parents were going to find out about that. That is one of the implications or one of the interpretations that people have talked about. And Eric himself said the show is full of blatant lies. There's a scene in the show about them kissing one another and showering together. It's a fantasy sequence, completely strange and unnecessary because it's real people in a real case. That's super complicated and very odd to do. An author by the name of Robert Rand, who wrote a book on this case in 2018, who you could say has studied the case extensively, stated that the only physical contact that through his study of the case was an incident involving a toothbrush in the woods when they were young. The older brother abused the younger brother with that, and that was a response to trauma, according to them, not some kind of weird-ass, steamy fantasy thing that Netflix is selling. It's just so strange. And now, as a result of the Netflix show, a lot of regular people who aren't going to go out of their way to do research, which, you know, who's to blame them, believe that the two brothers were in an incestuous relationship. They were seemingly in love. So why the would they make this up? It makes good TV. That's why the they would make that up and fill this with blatant lies and nonsense.
Then can you tell the court where Eric and Lyle Menendez are?
They're in the bathroom.
So that's an example of what they showed and an example of what they left out in regard to their more sympathetic narrative that they went with. They downplay the brothers' spending spree after the murders, where they spent $700,000 in 6 months. That was a detail that the prosecutors during the original trials argued heavily as to why this was about greed and not revenge for abuse or whatever it could have been from the more sympathetic perspective. That's a lot of money to spend in a very short period of time. But there's a lot of arguments to that, obviously, as well.
These kids had money before. There didn't seem to be controls put on them on how much money they spent. They were going to have money. I think it was pretty clear that they knew that they were out of the will. I suppose you could argue, actually, if something had happened to the parents, they might have less money than they had if the parents were alive.
The show then also skims over the complex legal battles surrounding the brothers' confessions to their therapist, Dr. Jerome Ozil.
There was very kind of my mind before this and led up to the fact where I had no choice.
They show Eric confessing in the show, but they didn't dig into the messy court fights over whether those confessions could even be used in trial. I don't know about y'all, but these don't just seem like minor details to me. They're crucial parts of a story that legitimately shape the understanding how this true event happened to a lot of people, more people than not. Like, this is a clear cherry picking of facts and just straight up inventing fantasy incest scenes. Netflix is not just telling a story or doing a documentary. They're in real time reshaping public opinion about a real murder case that has legitimate implications on real people in real life. It's very clear that Netflix's interpretation of this case is the framing of the brothers' motives as being a desperate act for self-preservation rather than greed, which is, by the way, why they were, put in jail life without parole. So, I don't know. It's kind of it's a wild contradiction. And once again, I'm totally cool with every case being re-examined, but Netflix being the nail in the coffin, even with the two people they're talking about and that this show is helping to exonerate, are like, this shit is full of lies and it's just blatant nonsense.
Real-life subject Eric Menendez is slamming the series, saying it is rampant with horrible and blatant lies.
The use of entertainment and television and storytelling techniques to evoke empathy for a murder and a crazy true crime case like this, for me, doesn't really sit right. And the guy who made the thing, it's I don't know. There's a lot of power that Netflix and these companies have. I don't know. I'm not saying they should be regulated, to be honest. I'm just making a video about it. I'm not a lawmaker. I'm just a YouTuber, all right, dude? I got my business hat on. I mean, my entertainer hat. Sorry, not my business hat. Jose and Kitty Menendez are portrayed through the lens of their son's accusations. We don't really see much of their life, their relationships, or the pain that their deaths caused on other people that were adjacent to them or whatever. It just makes them look really, really, really bad.
I am trying to save you.
You don't get to say when you did exactly the same thing when you were my age, Mom.
You are the hypocrite, huh? What about this?
Oh.
And it is a stark imbalance in the portrayal of these people, along with the weird incestual relationship and implication. Like, it just seems like this shouldn't have been made at the end of the day. I'm totally for the case being re-examined and potentially opened and maybe them being set free. They've spent a lot of time. I don't know, dude. I don't know where I stand when it comes to capital punishment. Shooting your dad in the back of the head with a shotgun is not good, and then going on a greed-filled spending spree is also not good. I don't want to say but there is a world in which the reaction to actions line up with that, and it isn't all black and white. I think that's the most important thing to acknowledge, is that none of this stuff is black and white, and it's kind of what Netflix is doing. It's just making it like black and white. This is entertainment. This is the narrative we're going to push. Not they claim they want to put the story out there and let people interpret it the way that they are, but they're not doing that. If they would have had Javier Bardem had a little more screen time. Josh Brolin, he bent over, he spread his asshole. I love Josh Brolin. He's a clown. It's Josh Brolin. I love Javier Bardem. He's one of my favorite actors. And on top of all that, there is a level of sensationalism and romanticism when you apply it to true crime that probably is not good for people's brains, to be honest. It's probably not good to consume so much just blatantly romanticized, blatantly sensationalized, blatantly speculative, heavy with implication stuff about people blending the lines of reality, people getting murdered, and I don't know, dude. I don't know, dude. I mentioned earlier that the idea of re-examining their case was kind of put in the forefront back in 2023 before this show came out, and that is absolutely true, but this is like PR for that, basically. The Netflix show seems to be PR for that. But also lies and manipulating them and like changing their story. But Eric supposedly wrote a letter to his cousin that talked about abuse in regard to his father, and another fellow, Roy Rossello, was a former member of a boy band, and he signed a declaration claiming that Jose Menendez also abused him as well. So there's plenty of evidence to uncover and re-examine the case and open things back up, and I don't think the Netflix show is helping the actual pursuit of justice in any way. It's just making the brothers look like they were defending their incestuous relationship. That's what it makes it look like to me. This conflation of media with a real trial also happened back with the O.J. Simpson trial. I don't know if you guys are super familiar with that. I have a bit of a hyperfixation. I don't know if you knew, but O.J. Simpson murdered his ex-wife and her like boyfriend or whatever, Goldman.
You park in the alley, and you put on a wool cap and gloves,
In the hypothetical, I put on a cap and gloves.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a up story. Somehow he got away scot-free because of a jury, and dude, that one was ridiculous.
Peter, why in the world would you want to play golf with O.J. Simpson?
Why not, Lois? He's the juice. One of the greatest football players ever. Peter, he murdered 2 people. What?
But that shit was an absolute circus. Media has absolutely impacted a jury and trial in the past with that instance, and probably even impacted the original trial of the Menendez brothers. And now, somehow 30 years later, it is having the exact same thing, the exact same effect, but because of a Netflix documentary. It's like a PR campaign for their innocence, potentially. Imagine a TV show overturning a murder conviction. Or they still murdered their parents. They still murdered their parents, absolutely. But imagine it suspending their sentence and allowing them to go free 30 years later. They still spend a long ass time in jail, no matter what. So a TV show impacting how justice is served. Crazy. Then we get into the JonBenet Ramsey connection to this entire thing, and just in general, the fact that the media has a role in shaping public perception of true crimes. It goes well beyond the Menendez brothers.
Had she lived, the child beauty queen would be 34 now. 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty has been covering this case since 1999. And in a recent interview with JonBenet's father, he held out hope the case can be solved.
Just like the Menendez case, JonBenet Ramsey's story was turned into a massive media spectacle, and an absolutely tragic crime was, through the nature of America, turned into a cultural phenomenon that still is talked about to this very day by true crime. And there's nothing, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with true crime, people covering it, etc., whatever. But being responsible when you're covering it or when you're talking about it, that is what is so important, and like respectful of the people involved. And I don't know, it's easier to just kind of get that value out of a video when it's like a guy talking about it, like a YouTuber. But when it's an entire massive production and the goal is for views on Netflix, not even, it's almost like a weird syndicated, it's a strange thing. It's a very, very strange thing. If you guys aren't aware of the JonBenet Ramsey story, the abridged version is JonBenet Ramsey was found dead in her Boulder, Colorado home in December 1996, and the media descended with a intensity similar to the Menendez trial. News outlets immediately began speculating on potential suspects, and they often zeroed in on her family. The Ramsey parents, John and Patsy, were portrayed alternately as grieving victims and prime suspects.
How can I tell you how much I love my daughter? I love her from the depths of my being. It's just unimaginable.
Unimaginable, too, that the life of this 6-year-old could be snuffed out so suddenly and so viciously. JonBenet Ramsey was a child filled with promise.
For a while, it was a relentless cycle of coverage fueled by salaciousness and sensationalism. There was an insane ransom note, and at the end of the day, no one for this case was ever convicted of the murder of this poor child. And there's a lot of evidence that has come out since the trial and since all this was investigated that paints a more clear picture now for sure than it was back then. And I'm sure the police and detectives and all, like, I feel like I've just got to fall on the side of the justice system, or else what the fuck's the point? But even then, you've got people like these people who have been wrongly convicted of shit and served long ass terms. There are so many conspiracy theories and people have been sued for speculating as to who killed who in this story. Some of these suspects that have been speculated to have killed JonBenet Ramsey are purely baseless legally, but they fuel public fascination. There's people on YouTube who literally are just like, this is who did it. This is who killed. You're welcome. Ah, yes. Outside of YouTube, there's a ton of docuseries suggesting everything from a family cover-up to an unknown intruder, which makes it very difficult and unfortunate that nobody knows, nobody's memory of this poor girl is of a tragic, horrible situation with justice being delivered at the end of it. It's just, how can we speculate more? And how can we, I don't know, dude. It's fucked up. For example, Burke Ramsey successfully sued CBS for $750 million after a 2016 speculative docuseries implied his involvement in the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, which is insane. He didn't win $750 million, but the lawsuit settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. I assume it was a lot, all right? All in all, I'm a little freaked out. I love mysteries. I love true crime stuff. I love haunted shit. I love legends. I love cryptids. I love all the unknown, right? I love all the unknown. But when you start to blur the lines and you start massively speculating and you start controlling the masses' version of speculation and what people are thinking and opening up big cases, it starts to really become ugly. I think the key is critical consumption of these things. Don't just blatantly believe everything you're hearing. Like if you're a Billy Carson viewer, that guy's a goober, okay? And a lot of people who are conspiratorial and speculative and who, you know, think that the system and the powers that be are always out to get them, you're not living in reality. And it's super important from a consumption perspective to think of things critically before you accept them into your brain. And I think that's my responsibility as a content creator to kind of help that. That's why I'm a fence sitter, okay? That's why I'm a fence sitter, because I don't know. I don't know. I don't pretend that I know things, okay? I'm making content. I'm trying to be entertaining, and I'm trying to see what people think, you guys think. I'm trying to figure things out and learn. And this Netflix thing has been bothering me for quite a while now because I am like addicted to true crime content. I love it, and I've made it myself and been a part of it. My girlfriend, she makes it all the time. I just think consuming it and creating it as critically as possible is the way forward. Not living your life paranoid of you getting murdered. It's not real life. Most of this shit is not real life. Ultra sensationalized stuff, it's bad. You think you're learning something that's cool and fascinating. There's a reason it's fascinating, is because human beings are scared little monkeys running around. Plus there's potential exploitation of victims and their families. I don't know, an inadvertent glorification of criminals. Bro, I don't really want to do it. The key is media literacy. Critical consumption, okay? Critical consumption. Be as smart as you possibly can. That is why I generally stick more to UFOs, conspiracy theories, and the fact that Saddam Hussein is the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar and the Iraq War was actually a cover for the search for Stargate. There's a growing movement behind that one, all right, guys? Anyways, at the end of the day, let me know what you think down below. What do you think about Netflix? What do you think we should do about it? Should we burn them? No. Just kidding. Just kidding. Think critically, consume critically, and yeah. Try it out. I don't know. I'm trying it out. You don't have to try it out. I'm gonna try it out though. For once.